Welcome to today's episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. On the show, we will break down the NBA's newly released schedule from opening games to Christmas Day and react to Team USA winning gold. That's all coming up and more on today's episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. Welcome to the show, and I have a very special guest joining me this week, Jack. Jack, how are you doing?
Feeling great, awesome schedule release last night, just counting down the days till we see some NBA basketball.
And there's a lot to break down here because we got the opening games, Christmas games, in-season tournament games came out a couple of days ago. So let's start with the opening week games. What are some games that really stand out to you right off the gate, right off the gun?
Well, as a diehard Celtics fan, I think everyone wants to see the Celtics raising banner 18 against their rival and really should be NBA powerhouse, the New York Knicks. Obviously, they brought over Mikal Bridges, other guys, Josh Hart, he's a year into Tom Thibodeau's system. Jalen Brunson played phenomenal for them. Those are two really heavyweight teams, should be a great kickoff to a season.
And it's definitely two of the top teams in the East, if not the two teams, in my opinion. And if you're New York here, you're seeing Boston, you're seeing them hang the banner. You saw what Boston did last year. You wanted the chance to play them in the conference finals. You couldn't because you were hurt. Now you have the opportunity to go in on Rig Night and spoil that opportunity for the Celtics and make a statement early that you are here not just to compete in the Eastern Conference, but potentially win the Eastern Conference and compete for an NBA championship. So this, to me, would leave more of importance to the Knicks. Obviously, the Celtics want to make a statement as well, saying we're still the big dogs of the Eastern Conference, but the New York Knicks here really have a chance to show the rest of the league that they are here as a championship contender right off the gun, game one.
Yeah, for sure. It really lights a fire under you. Being that team watching that banner, obviously they are big rivals. That's kind of like another matchup, the T-Wolves and the Lakers. Obviously, the Lakers kind of flamed out. That's the late game on opening night. The Lakers flamed out of the playoffs pretty early. That's been, somewhat of a reoccurrence for them and LeBron James's team. And then Anthony Edwards, not only the work he did during the NBA season, but really during the Olympics, staying the course, being that young guy, energetic. He can slam it like no one else in the NBA. I think that should be an amazing nightcap.
And for the Lakers, this is JJ Redick's debut as a head coach. And now they're coming in here hosting in the Crypto.com arena. They're hosting a big dog in the Minnesota Timberwolves. They are going to have to show early that they are a legitimate team because, again, the Lakers have not had great seasons these past couple of years. They made the conference finals 2 years ago, but it was a disappointing sweep to Denver. Last year, got lost in the first round to the Denver Nuggets in 5 games. So this has been disappointments for the Lakers. And now they bring in JJ Redick. And do we know what JJ Redick is going to be as a coach? It's really unknown because he has not had any coaching experience. And this is a great first test for him and his new coaching staff with Nate McMillan, Scott Brooks, as well as others, to just show that they are ready to revamp, refix this Lakers team. Because we looked at LeBron, we looked at Anthony Davis at the Olympics. Those two guys were arguably one of the top 4 best players on that Olympics team. And it wasn't really working out with the Lakers in general, but JJ Redick can show that he can make it work with LeBron and AD along with the others at the helm. So this is a big game personally for JJ Redick to make a statement right off the jump.
I heard you mention arenas. How about the Clippers opening their new arena on opening week? The brand new state-of-the-art Intuit Dome. The Clippers, they host the Suns October 23rd. That's a night game for those of you on the East Coast. That should be what a game right there. We've got Kawhi Leonard. He's going up right on Durant, small forward against small forward. You got Bradley Beal and Terrence Mann, the two of them head to head. New arena should be awesome. What a game that's going to be.
And the thing is with LA, the Clippers, speaking of what's next for the Clippers, because they are now in this little bit of a middle of the pack phase, especially losing Paul George to the 76ers. And who's going to replace the contributions of Paul George? Is it a guy, like you mentioned, Terrence Mann, to step up and elevate his game? Or can James Harden go back to the form he was maybe in Houston, maybe just getting some more production, but it's going to be a tough road for the Clippers, and we're going to see if they're legit right off the jump. And for Phoenix, they have the toughest schedule to start the regular season. So getting an early win here would be crucial for them as they look to thrive under new head coach Mike Budenholzer. Also, another game that I really like, which is on the second day of the regular season, the Milwaukee Bucks are going into Philadelphia, and this is really a lot of storylines going into this game. You've got Paul George, of course, making his debut with the Philadelphia 76ers. On the other side, you have Doc Rivers on the road against his former team that he coached.
He'll get booed. Yep.
And then you've got the Milwaukee Bucks, their whole team having a disappointing season last year, not really having the success that they had in prior years. They need to make a statement early here. So this is really an interesting game for both of these teams who are looking to contend in the Eastern Conference along with the Celtics.
Yeah, really underrated move for the Sixers. I know, obviously, Paul George, they got their big fish. Caleb Martin coming over from Miami. Every time I turn on a Heat game, he jumped off the screen. His shooting ability, his ability to really space the floor, can play good defense. I think that's going to be a huge asset for them in the regular season, but then particularly in the playoffs.
And they also brought back some guys like Kelly Oubre Jr., who was great for Philadelphia last year. And they also brought back backup point guard Kyle Lowry, who brings great veteran experience, can help Tyrese Maxey out. So Philly really did what they were destined to do this offseason with the cap room. They took advantage of it. They got Paul George. They got a great role player in Caleb Martin, along with bringing back some of the key players from last year's roster. So this is really the season for Philadelphia to expect to contend, because we've seen Philadelphia in the past with Joel Embiid. They have 0 conference finals to show for it with even their great roster in 2019 with Butler, Simmons, Embiid, and Harris. They still didn't make the conference finals. It's now coming a trend where Philly is just having disappointing exits in the playoffs. And when is it for Joel Embiid? Because now Joel Embiid is going to be put on a lot of pressure, because now this is probably the best roster he has ever had as a Philadelphia 76er, and he is going to have to make the most of it this season.
Yeah, Joel Embiid, a great center. Speaking of another great center matchup, the second-year Chet Holmgren going to Denver up against Nikola Jokic, another opening week game. That should be a great one. 2 really big dogs in the West going head-to-head.
And then also, going back to the Eastern Conference, the Orlando Magic have an interesting first game. This is the Battle of Florida. They go to Miami, and Miami for Orlando has particularly dominated the Magic the past decade, 2 decades. Miami's really owned the Orlando Magic, and now the Magic are in a position, disappointing first round loss, of course, to the Cleveland Cavaliers, but they are in a position where they got KCP, got Tristan da Silva, got the shooting help, and now this is their best roster in years, and they have the potential to be a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. Why don't you just go ahead, first game, make a statement on the road against the Heat, a team that's really declining in stock, a team that's not really where it was in the years prior, and make a statement against your rival. Show that we are the team of South Florida now. So I think that's an important game for Orlando to get them up and going for their crucial season under Paolo Banchero's 3rd season.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. The 2 kind of different styles of basketball clashing. On one hand, you've got the Miami Heat, kind of a gritty, grindy team. They get down there, they post you up. They're going to play physical basketball. Obviously, Jaime Jaquez, or Triple J, as Heat fans call him, he's been phenomenal in his role and is probably going to have to make another step up this year. And then you look at the Magic, they're really kind of very centric, shooting the ball. Obviously, Paolo, he's been amazing. Franz Wagner, they've got some guards there too that can make some plays. That different styles clashing together will make for some entertaining basketball.
And then you look at the Miami Heat side, because we really haven't talked about them. They've, as I mentioned, they've been on the decline here, and Butler now is in an interesting situation because he did not sign an extension with Miami this year. He's on a contract year, and I've said this on my podcast prior, but look out for Miami to be the team of the trade deadline, whether that's selling and potentially trading Butler or buying to get more assets to contend, because this Miami team is really unknown in some seasons. Like 2 years ago, 8th seed to the finals. Some years, they're very high in the standings. This team's really unknown, and a big factor of that is health. And Miami, they're one of the most interesting, if mysterious, teams in the NBA.
Yeah, I think it's really going to come down to, who really steps up. Obviously, Bam Adebayo, he just came back, had an amazing Olympics. That should help boost his stock and help boost the team's stock. And then Triple J, Jamie Hawkins, he's going to have to really step up in a big way. Can he make, that second year leap from being, a young star to a star or maybe even a superstar? We saw a lot of good stuff. He can play the 2, he can play the 3, he can play the 4, can guard all 5 positions. But I'd love to see more from him on the offensive end, particularly shooting the basketball from outside, making space and opportunities for other players.
And speaking of a young superstar, Tyrese Halliburton, who didn't get any minutes in the Olympics, made a hilarious post on Twitter about it, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The Indiana Pacers are having an early game in the regular season against their foe that they beat in the second round in the New York Knicks. And of course, this was a rematch of a classic Eastern Conference semifinal series where, of course, the Knicks pretty much got dismantled, injured in that series. The Pacers only won their home games. The Knicks only won their home games until Game 7 when Indiana went into the Garden and defeated the New York Knicks, going to the conference finals, playing against the Boston Celtics, obviously ultimately losing that. But now this is a test for both teams. Now you're reset. They're both fully healthy, and we'll see which team is better. And Indiana, I think, is coming a little bit under the radar this season after making the conference finals. When we're talking about the East contenders, we're saying the Celtics, of course, the 76ers because they got Paul George, the New York Knicks because they got Mikal Bridges and they're bringing their whole team back. But what about the Indiana Pacers, the team that just made the conference finals and beat the New York Knicks? They are still in this pack, and it's a very, very tight Eastern Conference. So Indiana could make a statement early here by getting another win in the Garden.
Yeah, another thing that really, I was just thinking about things the other day, and they made the NBA Cup Finals. So it really shows you that a team that kind of was under the radar last year is going to be under the radar this year. They kind of have that mantra, but they can rise up in big situations, especially look at a guy like Halliburton, his way to be able to play make, shoot, and then his defense took a big step up next year. I don't think we should be sleeping on the Pacers at all. But frankly, any big Pacers-Knicks game after that unbelievable series last playoffs should be entertaining for basketball fans.
And that's the thing with Indiana. The one thing they do need to fix is their defense, because their defense, for how good their offense was, their defense was just as bad as how good their offense was. And Indiana, if they want to contend, they're going to need to fix that defense under Rick Carlisle. Hopefully they can do it. They got Siakam, who can provide them more length. They have Miles Turner on the inside, but the key is going to be the perimeter guys, stopping guys in the Eastern Conference like a Jalen Brunson or a Tyrese Maxey, Jaylen Brown. The guys like Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, those guys are going to be crucial for the Pacers this year, especially on that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think Ben Mathurin as well. He's more of a forward, but there's a lot of great forwards in the East, whether you talk about, Giannis or Bridges now, Paul George, Jason Tatum. He's going to have to make that big leap. I think Pacers fans, they want a little more out of him. He was a pretty high pick, very, touted coming out of Arizona. And he does a lot great on the offensive end. We've seen some highlight jams from him over the years, but I'd love to see that kind of full and complete game going into year 3 for him.
And the thing is, people forgot about Mathurin because he had such a great rookie season. Then he hurt himself and he was out for most of his second year. So now Mathurin's coming back into that rotation of already what is a team that made the conference finals. So he can be a factor in that as well. And the final game that I want to mention is a rivalry that's been going on for a couple of years here in the Western Conference, the Dallas Mavericks and the Phoenix Suns. We didn't really talk about the Mavericks yet on the opening game schedule, but again, for the Phoenix Suns, this is another tough game coming off the gate. And the Suns start off, as we mentioned, with the Clippers in Intuit Dome. Then they got to go to the Lakers. Then they come back to host Dallas, and then they host the Lakers again. So this is just showing Phoenix's tough schedule to start the season, and it is important for them to start strong. But this is another great rivalry game to start off the Mavericks Western Conference title championship run. And now they're coming back here with adding Klay Thompson, getting some other pieces like Najee Marshall. And Dallas is going to look to continue to own the West, win the Western Conference, and get back to the NBA Finals and have another chance to compete for an NBA title. And it starts with making a statement on the road here in Phoenix.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Phoenix kind of handles, Derek Lively, people like that, PJ Washington, taller guys. Obviously, they've got Durant, who people have always gone back and forth. Is he 7'1"? Is he 6'10"? No one really knows. But Phoenix is lacking that kind of big. They obviously invested big assets in Beal, Booker, and KD, which are really important guys. But how are they going to handle facing a big center like Lively?
Yeah, Yusuf Nurkic, they of course traded for. That was part of the Damian Lillard trade, the three-team package that sent Ayton to Portland, Yusuf Nurkic to Phoenix. But the one thing that the Suns did do that was a little bit under the radar, happened a little bit later in free agency, was the acquisition of Tyus Jones, who they only got for $3.3 million a year, which for Tyus Jones, someone who started in Washington last year, had 12 points per game, around 7 assists, one of the best passers in the league. I know not a lot of people watch the Washington Wizards for obvious reasons, but if you saw him in Memphis when he was the backup for Ja Morant, great passer, someone who can run the offense, and that's what Phoenix really lacked. Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant aren't really guys who run your offense. So the fact that Mike Budenholzer got the starting point guard for the Phoenix Suns, that will be something that will be important for even creating shots, creating opportunities for Booker, Beal, and Durant as well.
Yeah, just trying to close this opening week, I think last year, the NBA, obviously, they did a good job with viewership, but the last couple of years, we've seen kind of more of an uptick every year. Last year, they really plateaued. NHL hockey did really well. Soccer in America is starting to be on the rise. In this new TV deal and kind of the way the NBA is handled, putting a premium on their primetime games, putting stars, putting those really best teams people want to see. I mean, the game is growing so much, but we need to stay competitive, especially with a lot of other sports rising. And Adam Silver handled this extremely well.
And that's why you see a team like the Lakers who have their games on their schedule, national TV. Of course, you got the Celtics up there. You've got some fun young teams rising up the ranks in national TV games like the Rockets, like the Pacers, the Orlando Magic. But the NBA really wants to emphasize those superstars. That's what they want to display, and that's exactly what they're doing in the opening week. But I want to ask you a question of, since we talked about these opening week games, which team, in your opinion, Jack, what team needs a fast start this season? Because sometimes it's really important to get off that fast start, because sometimes you're always going to have a losing streak. Eventually, it always happens to every team. You may have an injury or two. So what team needs to get off to a quick start here?
You know what? I have been banging my head against the wall. I have been saying it really since the Donovan Mitchell trade that the Cavs are going to be a wagon in the NBA. It hasn't really came together somehow. I don't know. But Cleveland has too much talent to not be in the conference finals, in the NBA finals, winning the championship. You look at a team that has Jared Allen securing that center position, Evan Mobley, a real true unicorn. We've seen a lot of great stuff from him. Obviously, Darius Garland, Donovan Spida Mitchell, Isaac Okoro, people like that. They have too much talent not to succeed. And whether it's coaching, whether it's chemistry, they need to get off to a fast start so that when they do end up going on that end of season run, it can be to try to take the 1 seed instead of trying to make the playoffs.
And I was a little surprised of Donovan Mitchell actually signing that extension, because if I was him, I probably wouldn't have signed it. Put the pressure on the Cavaliers to actually make a move. Of course, they have this two big situation with Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen on the big side. So the question is if they fit together, because Cleveland, they're not really definitively better than the Celtics. Do they have the potential, if everything works, to make a competitive series? Yes, we could have seen that if Donovan Mitchell was healthy, because again, he was out game 3 and game 4 in the second round against the Celtics. We do have to mention that. And that series could have been more competitive. But the Cavaliers now, this is year 3 of Donovan Mitchell, and the best you've done is win a game in the conference semifinals. The Cavaliers have to do more. Now they're on their second coach with Donovan Mitchell and Kenny Atkinson, and we'll really see if he makes a difference or not. So the Cavs are in a little bit of a weird situation. They're not really up there with the contenders because we haven't seen them play well, but we know they have the potential to do it. So the question for Cleveland is, when are they going to do it? That's the question. And if not, Who's going to have to be moved? Is it going to have to be Darius Garland? Are they going to have to split up the big men? That's the question for the Cavaliers. And I would say my team that needs a fast start, I'm going to stick in the Eastern Conference, and I'm going to say a same team in that division, the Milwaukee Bucks, because the pressure is on for Giannis. The pressure is on for Damian Lillard. Yes, they're champions. Yeah, Giannis, not Dame. But Giannis is a champion. Of course he is. Props to him. He won a championship. But that's over. That's 4 years ago now when we're getting into the 25 season. This is really a critical period for the Bucks of where they want to be, if they're going to be contenders or they are going to be an old team on the decline. And Milwaukee had a great start last season. They were 30-11 before they fired Adrian Griffin, which I don't think a lot of people talk about, but we know the issues they had with Griffin. Doc Rivers comes in. They're really a 500 below 500 team, drop all the way to that 3-seed position from being in a competitive race with the Boston Celtics, losing the first round, of course, because Giannis and Dame are out. But now this is a situation for Doc Rivers and the Bucks. You got to start winning games. Your season last year was not great, and we know what Giannis is capable of. We've seen Damian Lillard Dame time and clutch moments. We've seen Chris Middleton in the NBA Finals have huge performances. So Milwaukee really needs to get off to that fast start and show that they are still a threat to the Celtics in the Eastern Conference. Because, in my opinion, if the Bucks are at max potential, they can put up a fight against the Celtics. They could beat the Boston Celtics. I'm saying that if the Bucks are at full strength and they play the way that they're supposed to play, they can beat any team in this league.
Yeah, and I think it just really comes down to Giannis. He's kind of taken a back seat to some of these other stars since winning that championship. I don't know if it's resting on his laurels and a combination of kind of his injury history, but guys like Anthony Edwards, Nikola Jokic, obviously Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet down in OKC have really, taken that spotlight. And I'd love to see Giannis kind of put a stranglehold in this league and say, hey, I'm still here. I'm the Greek freak. I'm the guy Shaq dubbed the next big thing. And him and Dame should really want to take it this year and really grab a hold of that Eastern Conference and the NBA.
And again, people aren't talking about the Bucks. When we think of the East, as I mentioned earlier, it's Boston, New York, Philly. Nobody's talking about the Bucks, and they still have 2 top 75 players of all time. This team is still decent enough to be a contender in the league. So the Bucks should really go out, show a statement early, and show that they're here to compete in this loaded Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I think that comes a lot down to market size. Obviously there's a lot of Celtics fans, a lot of Knicks fans, a lot of Sixers fans. Some of these smaller market teams, looking at Indiana, you look at a Milwaukee, they don't get as much coverage in the daily media. That's where these star players really need to step up. There's a lot more Giannis fans I know than Bucks fans. Same with, Halliburton in regards to the Pacers. But it's always really nice to see these kind of small markets take down, the big boys, the Knicks, the Nets, the Celtics, the Sixers. So should be a great one.
Yep, and let's move on to the Christmas games, where we'll break down every Christmas game for you that came out. Of course, those are marquee matchups in the NBA. That's what you circle on your calendar, those Christmas games. And let's start with the 12 o'clock game, the first game. Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs going to Madison Square Garden to play the Knicks. Of course, the Knicks usually have their 12 o'clock Christmas game. Do you think the Spurs are the right matchup for this particular Christmas game? And what do you think Victor Wembanyama is going to prove at the Garden on Christmas?
I definitely think it's the right matchup. The Knicks, they're traditionally hosting that 12 o'clock game. And, they usually go up against whoever the NBA execs and the NBA fans usually dub as the fun team. I remember a few years ago, it was the Bucks with a young Giannis. He just made the NBA 2K cover. They were in those horrendous city jerseys back during COVID. They played, Giannis put up 38 in that Christmas Day game, and that really kind of kicked off his stardom. Now Victor Wembanyama has a chance to do the same in front of a national audience. We just talked about, obviously, that small market of San Antonio. He's going to need more looks, and if he would go down there and compete against a really good Knicks team on Christmas Day with all those eyeballs, that might really, elevate his stardom.
I would like to say That's true. The last thing you said is absolutely true. If Victor Wembanyama plays great, he will elevate his superstardom, but I think this is the wrong game in my opinion. No offense to the San Antonio Spurs, but other than Victor Wembanyama, who's on the roster? Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Malachi Branham. I mean, they signed a 38, 30, 36, whatever his age is, upper 30s, Chris Paul. Like, who really is on that San Antonio Spurs roster for a more competitive game, in my opinion? Maybe put the Heat, maybe put the Orlando Magic. And the Heat and Knicks have had this rivalry for years. They've played in the playoffs in 23. They've had a rivalry in the 90s. Why not put Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and that Miami Heat squad against Tom Thibodeau, Jimmy Butler's former coach, on that Christmas 12 o'clock? You get a rough, you get a physical, you get a gritty, grindy game to open up Christmas. Why not? Or put Orlando in there, a young rising team. Or you could have put Indiana as well and made them have that rematch in the conference semifinals. But no offense to the San Antonio Spurs, but the rest of the roster is just not really enticing. And do we really think this is going to be a great game? When we think of Christmas games in the NBA, we think of two closely competitive. It'll be a great matchup, go down to the wire. That's what we think about these Christmas games. Not a crappy team, bottom of the West San Antonio Spurs squad with just one good player going up against a Eastern Conference powerhouse in the New York Knicks.
Well, the one thing I will say, in regards to the schedule and everything, the Heat, I'm blanking on the team, but they do have a big game scheduled New Year's Eve. That's going to be an ESPN game. That should be a great one. But then I think a lot of people are sleeping on, Stephen Castle. I got to watch him in person during the Elite Eight at UConn. He's a really good defensive two guard, can play the one if need be. I think him and Wembanyama will put on a show regardless of the score. Again, it might be a boat race. Very well might be a boat race, but I don't think it's about the teams. I think it's about Wembanyama getting his shot in the Garden.
You know what really didn't make sense to me about San Antonio? I know they drafted Stephon Castle. He was great. And then they had the 8th pick, Rod Dillingham. They just decided to trade to Minnesota for a 2030 protected 2031 unprotected first-round picks, and Anthony Edwards is still going to be like 30 years old. That trade didn't really make any sense to me.
Traded the Spurs
needed a point guard for a 7th grader.
That kid's a 7th grader this fall.
For the Spurs, they needed a point guard. A young point guard. We're not talking about Chris Paul here. Maybe he can come off the bench. I don't know. But you want a young starting point guard that is on the same timeline as Victor Wembanyama. You don't want a 38-year-old Chris Paul to be there for 1 to 2 seasons and then he's gone. You want consistency. So to me, if you had a starting lineup of Rob Dillingham, Stephon Castle, Keldon Johnson, Malachi Branham, Victor Wembanyama, that is a good starting lineup. I mean, the Spurs roster isn't that great, but for what they have, that's a decent, young, rising team.
It looks like panic to me, honestly. It looks like they were trying to get something done. They were focused on that first pick where they took Castle, and they didn't really, focus in on what they were going to do at number 8. And obviously, shifty Rob Dillingham felled them. I think a lot of draft experts, I myself definitely thought he was going top 5. They thought he'd be gone by then. And then Minnesota came up there with an offer. And, San Antonio punted. That's literally what they did. They punted the pick down the road. But I thought it was a head scratcher as well, because I think Minnesota is going to be one of these teams that for at least the next 5 years will be pretty good.
And that's where we will go next, as they play at 2:30 against the Dallas Mavericks in Dallas in a Western Conference Finals rematch for the second game of Christmas. Of course, we saw this Western Conference Finals. Dallas won in shocking fashion in 5 games. I think everybody thought that was going to be a classic 6 or 7 game series. Dallas went into Minnesota, won the first 2 games, and then won the 5th game in Minnesota. But this game will be played in Dallas. Of course, Minnesota's essentially, I would say, running it back, while Dallas, of course, added, as we said earlier, Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall. So Dallas is and Quentin Grimes. So Dallas is getting a little bit better. And this is just an exciting matchup because even though the Western Conference Finals was disappointing, these are still great, two great basketball teams on the rise.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but my Christmas dinner is always a ham. And I think this is the perfect time to start your dinner. 2 electrifying teams. You've got Anthony Edwards slashing, finishing at the rim. Luka Doncic, the passes that kid can perform. Wow. Those 2 guys going head to head. You've got Klay for the Mavs. You've got Gobert, Cat, all those guys for the T-Wolves. 2:30 game, and then sets you up for one of the best rivalries in basketball at the Garden.
And that rivalry is the Boston Celtics playing the Philadelphia 76ers, two of the three best teams in the Eastern Conference. Paul George, Joel Embiid going into TD Garden, a team that pretty much has owned the Philadelphia 76ers the past 5 or 6 seasons in the Boston Celtics, and this is a game for Philadelphia. I love when teams go on the road, make statements, show that they are here, and this is another opportunity for a team that is contending. Go into Boston, go to the champs on Christmas, a celebration for a city, hosting a Christmas game, everyone's happy, joyous. Go make them miserable. Go in there and beat the Celtics. And this is a great matchup. Defensively, you've got Embiid on Porzingis. You've got Paul George can guard Jason Tatum. Caleb Martin, we've seen him, the Celtics killer in the past. Yeah. He can handle one of those guys. Like Philly now has the pieces to match up with the Celtics, and we're going to see a potential playoff series preview here on this Christmas Day.
Yeah, 2 years ago, this exact matchup happened, and it went to overtime. It was, one of the coolest games I remember from that season. Obviously, Tobias Harris, he had a great game. He's not there anymore, but that game will be on the Christmas list of many kids in Boston. I know myself, that's one of the ones I've got circled on my calendars, and just a really great middle point to an awesome night in the NBA.
And then prime time, 8 o'clock, you've got the two faces of the league for the past 10 seasons, Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors hosting LeBron James and the Lakers. We mentioned the Lakers a little bit earlier, but I want to get to the Warriors because, yes, they lost Klay Thompson. Yes, they lost Chris Paul. But in my opinion, they have one of the most underrated off seasons in the league. Getting Buddy Hield, getting Kyle Anderson and D'Anthony Melton, those are 3 solid role guys who can support Steph Curry. Now, I'm not going to say the Warriors are going to do anything like make the conference finals, but they didn't have that bad of an offseason. And now the Warriors are in an interesting position here. They're at crossroads. You've got the old guys. You've got Stephen Curry. You've got Draymond Green. You can even put Andrew Wiggins up there. And then you also have the young guys, the young risers. You've got Brandon Pajemski, who had a great rookie season last year. Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. So the Warriors have 2 different timelines here, and there's going to be a point. Maybe it's this season, maybe it's next season, maybe it's even the year after that. They're going to have to make a decision on the future and the direction of that roster.
Well, I think it's been really already kind of decided. They've added more kind of D and 3 players than 3 and D. Their objective last season was to go back to outscoring people, which didn't work. They got blown out against the Knicks, blown out against the Celtics. There was a game against Milwaukee. I think they might have lost by 50 points on primetime NBA action. They've been investing in their defense. Kuminga is great defensively. Buddy Hield, obviously people know him for the 3-point contest, but he's a great defender. Draymond Green's still there. Klay Thompson really didn't play great defense. They let him walk. So Steph Curry is still amazing. We saw him in the Olympics making every shot humanly possible. They add a lot of defensive guys to really try to hold teams to under 100 instead of trying to outshoot them every night, which is
and you never really know that this game could be a tiebreaker. Like the Lakers and the Warriors are in really similar positions. 2 generational talents, 2 superstars, 2 4-time NBA champions that have teams that have had disappointing years the past couple of seasons. They're getting older personally while they're not really seeing that success. So this could be really a game where maybe it matters at the end of the season. Who knows? And again, this is LeBron James, Steph Curry. This could be one of the last matchups we see them with. Like LeBron's getting up there. Like how many years in reality does LeBron James have left? So enjoy every matchup of these 2 generational talents that you can get.
Yeah, that sets up our last game of the night. Nuggets at the Suns. Another tangle of 2 Western Conference powerhouses to close out the night. Nikola Jokic, obviously, another great summer with the Olympics. Almost beat Team USA somehow. Him and Bogdanovich were cooking. And then the Suns, they've got, a lot of problems, as people would say. They've got that big 3 pretty well secured, but outside of that, people are wondering, so maybe the early season and Christmas Day will help quiet some of those rumors and the critics.
I also have a problem with this game because the Suns, they got swept in the first round last year. Yes, they have one of the generational faces, Kevin Durant, right? Why not make this the Thunder?
Yeah.
Why not make this Nuggets at Thunder? Have them go to OKC, have a Denver team that's lost a couple of players, go to this young and rising OKC team. Let's see what prevails, old versus new. That, like, OKC deserves this game. They absolutely, in my opinion, more than any team in the league, got snubbed from a Christmas game. Yes, the Bucks are not on this list. There's other teams that we mentioned earlier as well, like maybe the Heat, Magic, or Pacers, but there is no reason at all why the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that was the 1 seed in the Western Conference last year, not be on Christmas. That is very disappointing to me.
Yeah, I'm really surprised. The Thunder's a great point, but I thought they were going to do the Clippers with that new Intuit Dome. I know they obviously have 2 California teams already, but I thought they were going to kind of give Steve Ballmer and those guys the benefit of the doubt. They will, though, be playing the primetime game for Black Friday just after Thanksgiving. But, Suns, maybe they'll shock us this year. I'm personally down on them. I think you are as well. But, Katie, Beal, and Booker, maybe they've got some magic that we just don't know about.
Yeah, and I mean, you never know, because when you have 3 guys who could put up 30 on any night, like Beal, Booker, and Durant, you never know what could happen. So we'll see what happens with the Suns this year. But then there's also the reunion games that are going to happen this season, and I absolutely love reunion games. Players who've been on this team for a long time decides to leave and now come back to that specific team. And let's start with Paul George here, because he is going to have a reunion game against the Los Angeles Clippers. Of course, that didn't really end that relationship that well. Paul George wanted to get paid the same amount of money as Kawhi Leonard. The max contract did not. No. He put pressure on the Clippers. He wanted a trade maybe to potentially Golden State, didn't get that, so just decided to sign with the best team available in the 76ers. And he, on November the 6th, returns to the Clippers, not in the same stadium, of course, in the new Intuit Dome, but this is still an interesting matchup for both teams here, because if you're the Clippers, what's next without Paul George? I mentioned it earlier. What are you going to do now? You basically set this team up where it's Kawhi, Paul George, build the cast around them. We have a contender. It's been disappointing season after disappointing season, and now Paul George is gone.
Yeah, I wonder if he gets booed, honestly, coming back there. That'll be interesting.
I think so.
I think the records will definitely determine something. If the Sixers do as well as people think they will, that will kind of drive some more animosity and where the Clippers shake out and things. But yeah, that was such a failed experiment. And I think even bigger than just Paul George, trading Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a fireable offense. That is 100% a fireable offense to a general manager. They had him in the building, couldn't really see what was going on. Obviously goes to Thunder and is doing his thing night after night. But not only just those 2 guys, all the money they poured into that team really wasted, but they let Shai walk out the door.
Absolutely. And another reunion game here, one of the big ones, in fact, Klay Thompson going back to Golden State. Of course, we know what Klay Thompson did with the Warriors. 4 NBA championships, which not a lot of people can say they have. 2015, 2017, 18, and 2022 with the Golden State Warriors. And now the Splash Brothers are separated, and now he will get a return to Golden State. Of course, he will get a standing ovation because he is arguably the second best shooter of all time, one of the top 5 players in the Warriors franchise history, and one of the huge reasons why the Warriors had a dynasty.
Yeah, I already know that tribute video is going to be so awesome. Obviously people remember I think it was 47 points on 13 dribbles.
Yes, in that quarter.
Yeah, Game 6, Klay. I mean, the performances in the finals, him jumping up, playing really good defense night after night, the shooting ability, him and Steph in the finals of that all-star game, 3-point contest. That is going to be an amazing game. Not just Klay, but Luka and Steph going at it is always a good one. 2 top-tier point guards. And then Mikal Bridges going over the bridge to the Knicks. Oh, boy. Get your popcorn, ladies and gentlemen.
and he will go to Brooklyn again. I mean, is it really going to be what we say a reunion matchup? Because the whole stadium in Barclays will probably be a bunch of Knicks fans anyway. So it won't really be a reunion game, but we got to put it on the list because Mikal Bridges was with the Nets a couple of years after he got traded for Kevin Durant in that huge blockbuster deal at the 2022 trade deadline. And now, of course, he goes to the rival team. So maybe if there's a decent amount of Nets fans in there, may get booed. But at the end of the day, we still got to put it on here. It's still going across the bridge, joining the rival, which is pretty significant there. And then you've also got DeMar DeRozan, who joined the Sacramento Kings, got traded in a sign and trade in free agency. He did not want to go back to Chicago. And to be quite honest, I don't really blame him with the direction Chicago is, which is really nowhere because they're not rebuilding. They're not really contending either. So Chicago was in a difficult direction, and DeRozan decided to walk. He will go back to Chicago on January the 12th. I don't really know if he'll get booed or clapped. I think he may get clapped because that 2022 season with Chicago, when they were the 1 seed for a little bit, when Lonzo Ball was healthy, before All-Star break, finished as the 1 seed. DeMar DeRozan, remember that period where he had a back-to-back, 2 buzzer beaters in a row on back-to-back nights against the Pacers and the Wizards? So I don't know if he'll get clapped or booed, but whatever happens, happens. But DeRozan did give Chicago a little bit of relevancy since Michael Jordan, of course, departed. Yeah. That was like their only year of relevancy. So maybe he gets a standing ovation, but that's one that's really not as significant as the others. But again, it's still on here because he was with Chicago for a decent amount of seasons.
Yeah, and then the Kings just overall, I know a lot of people kind of put a damper on their season once we heard about the injury of Devin Carter. If he's able to come back and, be a good, solid rookie this year, obviously did a lot of great things at Providence that the Kings scouts liked. If he's able to be somewhat back from that injury and Keegan Murray makes that offensive step up that people have been looking from him, they could be a dangerous team. There's 10 spots now in the playoffs? Yeah, so you've got a chance. So if they play good basketball, win the games they're supposed to, minimize those kind of head-scratching losses that they had last year, and just throughout kind of steady the course, they could be a playoff team.
And people forget, 2022, the Kings were a 3 seed. Yeah, they had a disappointing season. They lost in the play-in as the 9th seed to the Pelicans without Zion Williamson in that final play-in game. But the Kings still have a decent team. It's just the Western Conference is so ridiculously loaded that people forget about the team like the Sacramento Kings. You look at their starting 5, De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis. You tell me 5 seasons ago that's not a championship contender, I'd call you crazy. The Kings have a decent roster. It's just the league and the rest of the world are just getting better and better and better at basketball. So it's tough to really put the Kings in any contender status, but they still have a decent team and could make a threat in the Western Conference if all things go right on year 3 of the Mike Brown era.
Turnovers. Gotta limit the turnovers. All the games I watch from the Kings, you've got guys hucking the basketball. Why is Domantas Sabonis bringing the ball up in the 4th quarter? It can't happen, especially in a tight game.
And I would also say, just like Indiana, their defense has just not been that great the past couple of seasons. I know Mike Brown's really, that's his specialty, and that's why they brought him in there, but it still continued to falter a little bit. So let's see if the addition of a defensive guard like Devin Carter and Jalen McDaniels from the Toronto Raptors, the brother of course, Jaden McDaniels on Minnesota, let's see if he makes a contribution to the defense as well.
Coming in at our last one, DeJounte Murray, after a rocky start with the Hawks last year, he shipped out after just 1 season with Atlanta.
I think it was 2.
2? Did you get 2? No, I think it was.
Yeah, he had 2. He had the 23 against Boston in the first round playoffs, and then 24. They didn't make the playoffs.
It was a very sour time.
Yes.
And the Pelicans, they lose Dyson Daniels, who I thought was really progressing well in their system. I didn't really understand that move from their part. But for the Hawks, they get kind of going more defense, less offense. They're giving the full keys to the car back to Trae Young. And I bet that's a boo scenario. I don't know about you.
I disagree. I don't think Atlanta is going to be anything. I think this is the year where they finally start just declining. They've always been that average team. And there was actually a stat, I said this on last episode, but like through 1,000 games, like the last 1,000 games at one point this season, they were exactly 500 and 500. So Atlanta's just been this middle of the pack team. And I really think this is the year that they decline. And Trae Young, like we've seen him lead a team before. Yes, he had that 1 year to the conference finals, but he really hasn't done anything since then. And I think since the Eastern Conference is getting better and better every single season, I think this may be the year where Atlanta finally falters and finally becomes a true lottery team. And for New Orleans, I mean, I didn't really think the trade was that bad. I mean, all you gave up was Dyson Daniels was the big one, of course, the young asset, but you didn't really give up that much draft capital. You gave up Larry Nance, who you don't really want on your roster anyway. I don't think really a lot of teams really need him. So for the Pelicans now, yes, Brandon Ingram, we have this whole dispute with him. But if he's still on the team, you look at the starting lineup: DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and put someone at center. Daniel Tice or maybe Uvis Messi, the rookie from Baylor, who they drafted in the first round. That is a great basketball team. And the Pelicans are not going away anytime soon. And it's just the thing with New Orleans is, can they stay healthy? And for DeJounte Murray, going back to Atlanta, I think he would definitely want some revenge in this one, especially since the Hawks had to make a decision this offseason. It was either DeJounte or Trae because we real clearly couldn't see them work together, and they decided to go with Trae Young. So this definitely means something for DeJounte Murray.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Hawks end up trading one of their bigs, trying to get assets. I know I've heard from some Hawk fans that they've got kind of an influx. They've got Capella. They've got some young guys that I think they like in the house. And, last season we saw September during training camp was really a flurry of trades. I wonder if we get that going again this year. I think that excites a lot of fans, brings a lot of popularity to the league right off the bat. So September trades, don't be surprised, folks.
And I also think the Hawks are a team to look out. Just like you said, they may trade a big man. And hey, if the Hawks aren't doing that great, they may look to explore the possibility of getting rid of Trae Young. If they are completely doing bad, you might as well just start over, start with Zachary Richaud and build that team up from the ground. And of course, they got lucked out with the number 1 pick, so we'll see how Richaud is. But for the Hawks, I just don't really know that they're going to be this team that's fighting for a playing spot anymore because of how good the East has become. But let's move on, though, to some rivalry matchups. Maybe we'll only do like 1 or 2 here because we are a little bit over time and a little bit behind schedule. But what are a couple of rivalry matchups that you are excited to see this season, or just in general, like from the past couple of years, what we've seen from that?
I mean, it's Celtics-Lakers for me. I've gone to the game a couple of times in my life. It's the best basketball game I've ever been to, twice. And every year, it always brings it 10 out of 10 every time, whether it's in Boston, in LA. It was LeBron and it was Kobe and Isaiah Thomas. Now it's LeBron and Tatum. You've got AD, you've got Brown. 2 really superstar-studded teams. The Lakers, obviously, they've got some issues past that. The Celtics are more towards the championship here, but it's always a great matchup. Fans, 50-50, both sides, really get into it. And, yeah, circle the calendars for that one always.
I would also say the Celtics, but not the Lakers. Not to be a little bit biased here, but I think the Celtics and the Heat, in my opinion, in the past, since 2020, what is that, 5 seasons? That has been the best rivalry in the NBA, hands down. There is no disputes about it. Yes, the Heat are on the decline. Of course, the Celtics just won the NBA title, 2 different directions. But we've seen almost every single playoff, except for the 21 playoffs, where the Heat got swept against Milwaukee, Boston, lost in 5 against Brooklyn. Every single postseason, the Heat and Celtics just find their way towards each other. And in the conference finals, it was 2-1 Miami in this first round. Boston got the best of them, but of course Butler was out along with Terry Rozier in that playoff series. But these 2 teams have really gotten the best out of each other. Like, I couldn't definitively say that the Celtics will be championship ready without getting through a team like the Heat. And would the Heat have been who they are without beating the Celtics in the first place? Like, these 2 teams have built each other to where they are today. And yes, the Heat haven't gotten that title, but Is there playoff Jimmy without the Boston Celtics? I don't think so. Are we really talking about the Miami Heat in any sense without them beating the Celtics twice in the conference finals? We're definitely not. So these two teams have made each other great these past couple of seasons. And again, I'll say it again. Yes, Miami's in a different direction, but this is still a great matchup, and both teams do not like each other.
Yeah, I think the East in general, there's a lot of bad blood, whether it be the Sixers, the Knicks, the Celtics, the Heat. All four of those teams, they've really been, the top dogs in there for a while. All of them ping-ponging against each other. I know each team plays at home and away once against each other. So those games all really are big ones, are kind of real animosity. Going over to the West, I think the kind of in-conference rivalries kind of tamper. Team rivalries, though, do stick, especially with the competing teams. And that, for me, is T-Wolves, Mavs. The T-Wolves, they're obviously really bummed. They kind of blew it last year in the playoffs against Dallas. Ant and Luka, I heard there was some back and forth between the two of them during some of those games. I think that's going to be a great game this year. At Dallas, at Minnesota, both times is something to watch.
I also want to bring up a young and rising rivalry. This rivalry just started last year, but I think this is going to be a rivalry for years to come in the Western Conference. How about Chet Holmgren versus Victor Wembanyama, OKC and San Antonio? Yes, San Antonio's on a completely different direction than the Thunder. Well, I wouldn't say completely different, but the Thunder are clearly ahead of San Antonio from what we've seen last season. But these are still two of probably going to be the best players in the league. Two big guys who compete against each other. Two skinny, athletic, vertical big men who compete against each other. And we need a little bit of that in today's game. All that we talk about in today's NBA, it's guards, it's the three-point shot. Why don't we get some big on big here in today's NBA?
Yeah, I think as we mentioned the schedule coming out, we mentioned the TV deals. A lot of fans, outside of their team, they watch for players. They watch for the name on the back. So, those guys, Ant, Wembanyama, Holmgren, Nikola Jokic, they're not watching a Nuggets game. They're watching a Jokic game. They're watching a Wembanyama game. So that's why it's so important the way the NBA did it this year, giving teams rest before their big primetime games. It's a lot different trying to watch a Lakers game without LeBron.
And let's move on to some NBA Cup matchups, because I did bring about it last episode, but there's some good matchups on here that I forgot to mention and Jack would like to mention. So Jack, what are some matchups you're looking forward to in the NBA Cup?
I think a lot of people remember 2 years ago, Ja and Steph back and forth, Warriors, Grizzlies, obviously the whoop that trick stuff going back games 4, 5, and 6. That was really entertaining myself personally. And those two guys are so fun to watch. Let's just be honest. Even though they're kind of not the best teams anymore, not really gunning for that title, that matchup should be really interesting. Bucks and Heat, they match up in the Cup. Thunder Lakers, I remember we said we should have seen a Christmas Day game from the Thunder. I think they're one of the teams to watch for in the NBA Cup. Really interested to see what you think on this IST.
And one of my favorite matchups is the New York Knicks going to the Philadelphia 76ers in a 1-3 seed matchup in East Group A. East Group A. That's going to be a great matchup because we saw that in the first round. One of the best first-round matchups last year. Of course, we remember the game 2 where Philly was up 5. New York stole that game. Then game 5, Philly's down 3-1. Tyrese Maxey saves their season with an essentially half-court game-time shot to force overtime, and they'll eventually win that game. That was one of the best first-round series. And that game, that in-season tournament game in Philadelphia, could determine who wins that group and who moves on to the quarterfinals and knockout rounds of the in-season tournament. I would also say Mavs at Nuggets as well. That's a rivalry in the Western Conference. The Nuggets being the number 1 in that group, Mavs being the number 2 in that Western Conference group in-season tournament. And for Denver here, I mean, people are forgetting about you. You lost to Minnesota in the second round of the playoffs. You just won a title 2023. Everyone's forgot about you. You lost KCP. You lost Reggie Jackson. You lost Jeff Green, Bruce Brown from that title team. Go ahead, make a statement in the in-season tournament. Make a statement saying we are still here. We are still a threat in this Western Conference. And that's what I really like about the in-season tournament. You brought it up a little bit earlier with Indiana saying we're here to play. We're competing against the best in the NBA. And of course, they made the conference finals after making the championship game of the Emirates NBA Cup. And a team like Denver could say, hey, we're back. We're here. That's what I love about this in-season tournament, because teams can prove that they are legitimate threats to others.
It is so cool. They did such a great job from being able to incorporate the City Edition jerseys. I know people have kind of trashed some teams, but I like how they're using them in kind of a premium format here. It's, drawing more attention. It has the feel of a playoff game. They changed the court. They experiment basketball in Vegas, which from last time I heard did pretty well. And they're putting teams together to make these little rivalries early season that maybe, you see a guy in the playoffs, they're like, hey, we went back and forth early for this title. Let's do it again. Great job, NBA. Great job, Adam Silver. We've said a lot about that since he's taken over as commissioner.
Yeah, he's done a very good job. And of course, potential expansion to come. The media deal, little disappointing that we lost Turner, TNT. Yeah. But of course, we'll get to see new faces like what we saw with Noah Eagle and Dwayne Wade at the Olympics. They were incredible. So
Mike Tirico doing the best of the best every week.
And we'll see how NBC comes into the game. Hey, maybe they take some TNT guys as well as Amazon Prime in that media deal. And finally, before we get to Team USA winning gold, let's discuss some other games that we didn't really bring up, but what are some of your games other than the ones we've mentioned that you're looking forward to on the NBA schedule this season?
There's been mixed opinions about Hawks #1 pick Zachary Reese-Sachet. A lot of people, because he's doesn't have the hype surrounding him that a Wemby or a Zion Williamson does. He kind of went under the radar this year in France. No one was talking about him since he was 15 or 16 years old. But this kid can play. He is exactly what Atlanta needs. His dribbling, wow. His shooting, wow. Everything really jumps off the screen for me. And on December 19th, he's going to go up against Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio. Christmas break for a lot of people. This should be a great one to watch. Two young generational big men trying to kind of carry and figure out with their unstable teams so far. So mark that one down.
And what's surprising is we've mentioned all these games and we haven't even mentioned the NBA Finals rematch, Boston and Dallas. On January 25th, it'll be in Dallas, and then on February the 6th, it will be in Boston. I mean, the finals, yes, it was a 5-game series. It was a quick series, but the Mavericks are looking for revenge here. Like, you want to see the best play the best, and that's what we saw last year. The Mavericks were the best in the West. Celtics, of course, best in the league, won the NBA title, were the best team in the regular season, and now we get to see this again. And it was disappointing, as I mentioned, but now the Mavericks added Klay Thompson, a guy with championship experience. Kyrie Irving had disappointing games against the Celtics. He may look to have one of his Kyrie-esque games in this 2-matchup series in the regular season. And then for Boston, you want to continue to show that you're the best in the NBA and continue that path to trying to get back-to-back NBA titles.
Yeah, I think some of these kind of rematch stuff, I think a lot of people wished that a team like Minnesota or Denver or even OKC made the finals. But you know what? Newsflash, people, they didn't. So you didn't get that kind of young star power. You've got Luka, obviously, who's been there really since draft day, has been a face of the league. And they had Klay Thompson. PJ Washington is really good as well. That's a Friday night game on ESPN.
And then I would also say, we didn't mention this one, but how about Denver and Philadelphia, and Embiid versus Jokic, two of the best big men in the game? That's always an exciting matchup. Philadelphia and Denver, two great contenders in this league. And again, to me personally, even though I'm a little bit young, I like old school. As I mentioned with OKC and San Antonio, I like the big man versus big man. And same thing here, Embiid, Jokic. I like that big man to big man matchup. So that is going to be games I'm going to circle on my calendar, especially the one in Philadelphia, because I think Philadelphia, no offense to Denver, but I think Philadelphia is a little bit of a better environment for fans than Denver. But both matchups will still be great to see those two generational centers play on the court against each other.
Yeah, a lot of people, kind of trash Embiid, hasn't made a conference finals ever, which is true. But his ability to, from his rookie year to now, develop a three-point shot, develop that kind of technique at the free throw line is really a credit to him. Most big men can't do that. And congrats to him for really stepping up. He also stepped up for Team USA, bringing home the gold medal in the Olympics. Obviously, just beat France. That was a tight game, neck and neck. Really was tight neck and neck the whole Olympics. Josh, I want to get your thoughts on that. World champions once again.
Yep, the U.S. did it again, and Steph Curry. Have we seen this in the past? Vintage Steph Curry. France was on the doorstep. They were coming. France would not go away. Give credit to the Frenchmen.
4 points with 2 minutes left.
They were not going away. That team was playing great. And Steph Curry hit 4 threes in a row. And that last one, double team, one leg, essentially fading away, nails that three-point shot. That is an iconic Steph Curry moment. But you got to give credit to Team USA because, once again, we got to mention, the world is catching up. This is not going to be the 92 Dream Team where they're beating everybody by 40 points. This is new basketball. This is where our globe is going today in hoops. The world is catching up. And I said this, there will be an Olympics. Could be the next one. Could be 2032. Could be 2036. The USA will lose eventually, and these gold medals are not easy. FIBA basketball is a different game. It's different rules. You have to adjust, and teams like France, teams like Serbia, they've been playing together for years. This Team USA team, yes, they have the more superstar talent, but they just get jumbled together maybe like a week or two of training camp, and then they have to go win a gold medal. That is not easy to do, and you got to give credit to Team USA. Kevin Durant getting his 4th gold medal. LeBron James, of course, adding to his legacy. This was a collective team win.
I think a lot of people, Kevin Durant, he did play really well, especially coming back from that injury, but I really feel like some of this discourse really lands on the shoulders of Steve Kerr. When Coach K retired from this job of really kind of dominating flat out Team USA, Kerr was tasked with this ability to, 1, pick the roster, and 2, manage the substitutions. KD got hurt pretty early on in the, training camp?
I think it was training camp. He was out for all the exhibitions, came back for the first Olympic game against Serbia.
So guys like Tatum and Halliburton, they were in the rotation. And then once Durant came back, he really kind of fully switched things up, making Durant play when he wasn't really fully ready, and that cost the team early. We saw him and LeBron were having trouble communicating in that first game against Canada. They went down 10 before things turned around, and fans of all teams were upset. I know myself and a lot of Celtics fans. Dave Portnoy was very vocal about things. Barstool Sports media superstar, and he needs to kind of learn how to just manage the subs better. He's had a really great team with Golden State, obviously winning a lot of championships, but I feel like some guys kind of got left out. Even like, Joel Embiid didn't play when he was hot, which was really a head scratcher for a lot of USA fans.
Look, I'm going to say this, and you may not like it, but I think Steve Kerr, at the end of the day, did exactly what he was supposed to do. He came in there, won gold, no questions asked. Look, Jason Tatum, he just won a title. Could have won Finals MVP. I think it deservingly went to Jaylen Brown. He won a title. He's an NBA champion. He's a superstar. He was All-NBA first team this season. But LeBron James and Kevin Durant, can you say this? They essentially play the same role as Jason Tatum. Do you agree with that? Slashing small forwards, attacking the rim. But then there's maybe a guy like Bam Adebayo, who not a lot of big men on Team USA, not a lot of guys to be in that center position. So there's really a difference there, and you really need certain players more than others. And Jason Tatum, if he wants to play again, he may be the featured guy on Team USA because he will now be the best slashing small forward because LeBron and Durant will obviously be gone by then. It's tough to see that, especially since he played in the 2020 Olympics a lot and helped to that gold medal immensely more than he did this one. But again, this is a little bit different because you have legends, players who changed the game, LeBron and Kevin Durant. And are you really going to say no to them in their last ever Olympics? So that's my argument. But again, you can take that how you want to feel about it. But again, we still know Jason Tatum's an NBA champion. Yes, could he have gotten in a little bit more, especially when at the end of the games when it was getting to the point where there was no way Puerto Rico or South Sudan were going to win? Maybe. But at the end of the games, I think Steve Kerr did exactly what he's supposed to do. And you've got a lot of pressure on you when you're the Team USA head coach. You have this gold medal streak. You have to win. It's gold medal or bust. That's the expectation. So there's a lot of pressure on Steve Kerr. And at the end of the day, Kevin Durant won them a couple of games. LeBron won a couple of games. Steph Curry won a couple of games. The guys who started, even Devin Booker, someone who we haven't really talked about in the success, he was consistent every single game in this Olympics. So the guys who Steve Kerr started, even Joel Embiid, the guys who played when it mattered, they were the main reasons why Team USA won. So I don't think Steve Kerr did a single thing wrong.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we did win gold. So we can kind of table these discussions for 4 more years from now. One thing we cannot table, how excited we are for this NBA season. A lot of great games from September really to June. Should be a great season.
Yes, the NBA is coming very soon. Preseason will be around in September. It's going to be a very exciting NBA season. Season 2 here for us, season 77 for the NBA. And it is just going to be incredible. We will see if the Celtics defend their NBA title. We will see if a young rising team like Minnesota or OKC comes on up and potentially wins an NBA title. But the best thing about the NBA, what I love about it the most, is you have to expect the unexpected because that is exactly what the NBA is. Thank you so much for watching the Take Your Shot podcast. Remember to please leave a like and subscribe. That'll mean a lot to me. Thank you so much, Jack, for being on the show. It was absolutely incredible. And we will be back next Friday for another exciting episode, doing some more over-unders and more stuff that comes up in the NBA. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next week.